You can come to my engagement dinner, my sister said, smoothing the sleeve of her cream dress like she was granting me mercy, but stay at the back table. Evan's father is on national television every night. Please do not embarrass us. My mother nodded before I could answer. My father looked at the floor, and that was how I learned my family did not just want me quiet. They wanted me placed where important people would not have to see me. My name is Nora Hale. I work nights as a neonatal transport nurse. That means when a baby is born too early, too small, or too sick for the hospital they are in, I am one of the people who takes that baby somewhere safer. Sometimes by ambulance, sometimes by helicopter, sometimes through weather so bad the windows look like black water. I sit beside an incubator that hums like a tiny engine, watching a chest rise and fall beneath skin thin enough to see veins through it. Most people hear nurse and think soft shoes, a clipboard, and a kind voice at a bedside. My family heard nurse and thought small. My sister Meredith had always been the beautiful one, the polished one, the one my parents photographed from every angle while I stood half inside the frame holding someone's coat or purse. Meredith knew how to make a room look at her. She also knew how to make people feel lucky that she looked back. When she got engaged to Evan Cross, my parents acted like she had married into royalty before the wedding even happened. Evan was charming, quiet, and rich enough not to explain himself. But the real prize in Meredith's mind was his father, Julian Cross. He was the kind of actor whose face Americans knew before they knew his name. Courtroom dramas, primetime interviews, charity galas, magazine covers and airport shops. My mother said his name like it had gold leaf on it. Meredith had planned the engagement dinner for months. Private dining room, white flowers, a photographer, a small guest list that somehow included everyone who could help her feel more important. I was invited last, not because Meredith wanted me there, because my absence would have raised a question she did not want to answer. She called me the week before the dinner. Her voice was bright in that brittle way people use when they are asking you to swallow something humiliating and pretend it tastes fine. She said, "Nora, I need you to understand the room." I was standing in the hospital locker room, still in scrubs with dried antiseptic on my hands and the sound of a monitor alarm echoing from the hall. I said I understand rooms. She ignored that. She said Evan's family is used to a certain level. His father knows everyone, producers, donors, people from the network. I do not want the night becoming about where we came from. She said it like our childhood was a stain on a dress. Then she said the sentence she had clearly practiced. "You can come, but not as my sister. If anyone asks, I will say you are an old family friend." I waited for my mother to object. She was on the call too. I heard her breathing in the background. Instead, she said, "It is Meredith's night, honey. Just help your sister." My father said nothing. That was his specialty. Silence with a pulse. I should have hung up. I should have told Meredith to enjoy her perfect room without me. But families train you slowly. They teach you which pain is normal. They teach you that being asked to disappear is not cruelty, it is cooperation. So I said, okay. The night before the dinner, I was called to a rural hospital after midnight. A baby girl had been delivered at 27 weeks. Her lungs were not ready. Her mother was still in surgery. Her father kept standing up and sitting down because he did not know where fear belonged in his body yet. We loaded the baby into the transport incubator. She weighed less than 3 pounds. I could see the blue line of a vein in her scalp beneath the tape. The ambulance lights painted the trees red as we pulled away. Her oxygen dipped twice on the road. I talked to her the whole way, not because she could understand me, because sometimes a voice is the only human thing in a machine full of alarms. I told her she was stubborn. I told her she had terrible timing. I told her we were not doing all this work for her to quit before sunrise. She made it. At 6 in the morning, I gave report to the NICU team, washed my hands until my knuckles stung, and drove home under a sky turning gray. I slept for 4 hours. Then I put on a navy dress, pinned my hair back, and drove to my sister's engagement dinner, where I had been instructed not to embarrass anyone by being exactly who I was. The restaurant sat on a hill outside the city, glass walls, valet parking, warm lights that made every table look expensive before anyone sat down. Meredith had chosen pale roses and gold-rimmed plates. Every detail whispered wealth in a voice trained never to shout. When I arrived, Meredith met me at the entrance. She looked beautiful. That made it worse. Her hair was pulled back in a soft knot. Her diamond flashed when she lifted one hand and pointed behind me. "Back table," she said. I followed her eyes. There it was, a small round table near the service door, close enough to the kitchen that I could hear plates being stacked, far enough from the center that no one would accidentally include me in a photograph. My mother stepped beside Meredith and adjusted my collar without looking at my face. "Just for tonight," she whispered. "Do not make this hard. If you had been standing there in my place wearing your nicest dress after a night of keeping someone else's child alive, would you have walked out, or would you have stayed just to see how far they were willing to go?" I stayed. Not because I was weak, because sometimes staying is how you let people finish revealing themselves. Meredith took my arm and guided me through the room. She introduced me twice before we reached the back. This is Nora, an old family friend. The first time the words stung. The second time they settled. Old family friend. Not sister. Not daughter. Not the girl who used to braid Meredith's hair before school because our mother was already at work. Not the person who picked Meredith up after her first breakup and drove her around the lake until she stopped crying. Not family. Friend. Old one. Something faded and useful only when needed. I sat down at the back table and folded my hands in my lap. From where I was, I could see everything. Meredith at the center. Evan beside her, handsome in a charcoal suit. My parents glowing under borrowed light. Guests leaning toward them because proximity to Julian Cross made even future in-laws look interesting. Julian had not arrived yet. That was the tension Meredith kept watching for. Every time the door opened, her shoulders lifted. Every time it was someone else, she smiled harder. Evan came by once. He looked at me with the mild confusion of a man who knew he should know where to place me but had not been given the right label. "You are Nora," he said. I nodded. He said, "Meredith said you work in healthcare." Healthcare. I almost smiled. That was how she had softened it. Sanded the word nurse down until it had no shape. I said yes. Nights mostly. Before he could ask more, Meredith appeared beside him. "Evan, your aunt just arrived." Her fingers closed around his arm, a warning dressed as affection. He let her lead him away. The dinner began. Servers moved like shadows. Wine glasses filled. Meredith laughed at the right volume. My mother dabbed under her eyes during the first toast before anything emotional had happened. My father raised his glass whenever everyone else did, always a half beat late. I ate slowly. I listened to people talk about vacations, houses, shows they had seen, people they knew. At the head table, Meredith was blooming. At the back table, I was remembering another baby. Not the baby from the night before. Another one from 3 years earlier. A baby named Lily. A private emergency. A grandfather standing outside NICU doors in a baseball cap asking me if she would survive the ride. I remembered his hands more than his face. I remembered telling him, "I do not know yet, but I will not let go." Then the room changed. It was subtle at first. A ripple near the entrance. A shift in posture. Guests turning their heads. Someone whispered his name. Julian Cross had arrived. He was taller than I expected. Older too, but in the way famous men are allowed to age, with silver at the temples and lines that looked thoughtful instead of tired. He wore a dark suit with no tie. His smile was calm, trained. The kind of smile a man learns after decades of strangers thinking they know him. Meredith rose so quickly her chair almost tipped. Evan hugged his father. My mother looked like she might stop breathing from excitement. Julian greeted people with practiced warmth. He kissed Meredith's cheek. He shook my father's hand. He said something that made the head table laugh. Then he looked around. Not dramatically, just a quick scan of the room. A famous man checking a room that had already checked him. His eyes moved over the flowers, the guests, the waiters, the back wall. Then they stopped on me. I felt it before I understood it. Recognition has weight. It is different from attention. Attention passes over you. Recognition lands. Julian's smile faded. His face changed so fast that even from the back of the room I saw it. The public face dropped. Something private stepped forward. He said something to Evan. Evan followed his gaze. Meredith followed Evan's. Then Julian stood. The entire room noticed. Of course they did. When a famous actor leaves the head table in the middle of his son's engagement dinner and walks toward the kitchen door, people look. He came straight to me. Meredith moved first. Her face had gone pale beneath her makeup. She stepped into his path, smiling too wide. "Julian, we can bring her up later. She is just." He walked past her. Not rudely. Worse. As if she was not the important thing between him and the person he needed to reach. My mother stood halfway, then sat back down. My father lowered his glass. I did not move. My heartbeat was loud enough that I could hear it under the clink of silverware. Julian stopped at my table. For 1 second, he only looked at me. Then his hand went to his chest, not theatrically, not for the room. It was the instinctive movement of a man remembering something that had once hurt him badly. He said, "Ma'am, I did not know you were here." The room went quiet. Not all at once. In layers. First the table beside me, then the head table, then the far corner where someone had been laughing. Silence spread, until the only sound was the kitchen door swinging behind me. Julian pulled out the chair across from me but did not sit. His hand trembled slightly on the chair back. He said, "I have tried to find you for years." My sister made a small sound. I looked at him, searching his face. I knew I had seen him on screens my whole life, but that was not what he meant. There was another memory underneath. A hospital corridor. A storm. A man in a baseball cap and a mask standing outside NICU doors with his hands pressed together so tightly his knuckles were white. Then it clicked. Lily. 3 years earlier. A premature delivery in a small hospital that could not support her. A transfer through rain. A grandfather who was not famous in that hallway. Just terrified. Julian Cross. He had not been an actor to me that night. He had been a grandfather asking whether the baby would survive the ride. And I had been the nurse who told him the truth. Julian reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He pulled out a small plastic sleeve, the kind hospitals use for keepsakes. Inside was a tiny cloth band. My throat tightened before he even opened it. The band had faded from pink to almost white. On it in black marker were 4 words in my handwriting. Keep fighting, little star. I used to write something on the bands before transport when there was time. Not medical, not official, just human. A tiny note for a baby too small to understand, and parents too terrified to hope. I never knew who kept them. Julian placed the sleeve on the table in front of me. He said, my granddaughter was born weighing 2 pounds. Her lungs were failing. Her mother was unconscious. The doctors told us she might not survive the transport. His voice carried, not because he raised it, because every person in the room had decided to stop breathing. He looked back at me. This woman rode with her through a storm. She kept one hand on that incubator and one eye on the monitor for the entire trip. When we reached the hospital, she came out and told me my granddaughter had made it through the ride. He swallowed. Then he took out his phone. The room watched him unlock it, open a photo and turn the screen outward. A little girl filled the screen. Curly hair, pink rain boots, a crooked grin. She was standing in a garden with mud on both hands and joy all over her face. Julian said, this is Lily now. She sings in the car. She hates peas. She calls me Jules because she cannot say grandpa when she is tired. A few people laughed softly, but it broke on emotion. He looked at Meredith then at the table where my parents sat frozen. He said, someone explain why the woman who helped save my granddaughter is sitting by the kitchen door. No one answered. That was the first honest thing my family had done all night. Meredith tried. She always tried when silence threatened her. She stepped forward with a smile that had started to crack. Julian, there must be some confusion. Nora is just. He turned to her. Just what? 2 words. Gentle. Deadly. Meredith opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Evan stood slowly from the head table. His eyes moved from his father to me, then to Meredith. He said, Meredith, who is she? My sister stared at him. For once, she did not know which version of herself the room wanted. My mother whispered Meredith. It sounded like a plea and a warning. Someone at the table near the flowers said it before anyone in my family could shape a lie. She is Meredith's sister. That sentence did what Julian's question had started. It split the room open. Evan looked at Meredith as if her face had rearranged itself. Your sister, he said. Meredith reached for him. He stepped back. That tiny movement hurt her more than a shout would have. He said, you told me she was a family friend. Meredith's eyes flashed toward me, as if I had betrayed her by existing correctly. She said I did not want tonight to become complicated. Julian looked at the back table, then at the head table. He said, nothing about honoring your sister is complicated. My father closed his eyes. My mother covered her mouth. I stayed seated. That was the part they hated most. I did not rescue them. I did not soften it. I did not explain their cruelty in a kinder language. I let the room hear the silence they had built. If you like stories where the truth does not rush but still finds the room at the exact right moment, stay with me. Because this was not the part where my sister fell apart. This was the part where she decided to make it worse. Meredith straightened. Her pride came back before her sense did. She said, you do not understand our family. Nora has always been dramatic. She makes everything about her job. A laugh moved through the room, but it was not friendly. Julian looked almost sad for her. He said, your sister has not said 1 word. That landed harder than anything I could have said. Evan ran a hand over his mouth. Meredith turned to me then. Her voice lowered, but the room was too quiet for privacy. Nora, tell them, this is not what it looks like. I looked at her. For the first time that night I spoke. I said, you told them I was an old family friend. 5 words. That was all. But the room did the math. My mother began to cry, not because she was sorry, but because being seen doing wrong feels like pain to people who confuse exposure with harm. She said, Nora, please. I looked at her. You agreed. She stopped crying for half a second, stunned by the accuracy. My father stood. He looked older than he had when I arrived. He said, we should have said something. I said yes. He sat back down. No one comforted him. Julian picked up the small plastic sleeve from the table and held it carefully, like the cloth inside was still wrapped around a living wrist. He said, I came here tonight to welcome Meredith into my family. Before I do that, I need to understand what kind of person asks her own sister to sit in the shadows because she is ashamed of honest work. Meredith whispered, I was not ashamed. Evan said, you hid her. That was the difference. Not complicated. Not misunderstood. Hidden. Evan turned to me. I am sorry, he said. I believed what I was told. I nodded once. I did not owe him comfort either. The photographer stood frozen near the wall with his camera lowered. The white roses looked ridiculous now, the gold plates, the candles, the whole room Meredith had built to prove she belonged somewhere better. All of it had become evidence. Julian pulled the chair beside me away from the table. Then he sat down, at the back table. The room shifted again. He placed Lily's photo between us and looked toward the head table. He said, I think I will eat here. For the first time all night, I almost smiled. Evan left the head table next. He came to the back, pulled out a chair, and sat across from his father. Meredith whispered his name. He did not turn. Then one of Evan's aunts stood and moved her plate. Then a cousin. Then another guest who clearly did not know what to do but understood where the moral center of the room had moved. Within 5 minutes, the back table was no longer the back table. It was the only table anyone wanted to be seen near. Meredith stood alone beside her expensive flowers. My parents remained where they were, trapped at the center of the room they had wanted so badly. The dinner did not recover. How could it? Every toast after that would have sounded like a lie wearing perfume. Evan asked the servers to pause service. He spoke quietly to Meredith near the hallway. I could not hear every word, but I saw her face. I saw the moment she realized charm could not pull her out of what character had put her into. She cried. Not the soft, pretty cry she used when people were watching. A frustrated cry. Angry. Humiliated. The cry of someone who thought the room was hers and discovered it had a conscience. Julian stayed beside me. He asked about my work, not like small talk, but like the answer mattered. He asked about staffing, about transport delays, about rural hospitals, about the equipment we lacked and the babies who paid for those gaps in minutes. I answered carefully at first, then less carefully, because he was listening, not waiting to speak, listening. By the end of the night, the engagement dinner had become something else. No formal announcement, no sparkling speech, no perfect family photo. Just a famous actor sitting beside a woman her own family had tried to erase, asking her what needed to change so more children could survive the ride. When I left, Meredith was in the lobby with Evan. Her makeup had streaked under one eye. My mother stood beside her, rubbing her back, glaring at me as if I had walked into the room and planted the truth there on purpose. Julian walked me to the valet stand. He handed me the plastic sleeve with Lily's band. I shook my head. That belongs to your family, he said. It belongs to the person who wrote it. I looked down at the faded words. Keep fighting, little star. He said I carried it because I never wanted to forget the woman who handed my family hope when we had none. I am sorry your own family needed a room full of witnesses to see her. I did not trust myself to speak, so I nodded. On the drive home, I put the band on the passenger seat. Streetlights passed over it, bright then dark, bright then dark. I thought about the first time I had written those words. I had been exhausted. The marker was almost dry. Lily's oxygen kept dipping. I wrote it because I needed something in that ambulance to feel less mechanical. Keep fighting, little star. I never imagined the words would come back to me in a restaurant, where my sister had tried to make me disappear. Meredith called before I reached my apartment. I let it ring. My mother called next, then my father, then Meredith again. By morning I had 8 missed calls and 1 text from my sister. It said, "You ruined everything." I stared at that sentence while my coffee went cold. Then I typed back, "No, I sat where you put me." I blocked her for the rest of the day. Not forever, just long enough to enjoy the silence without someone trying to edit it. The next week, Evan postponed the wedding. Meredith told everyone it was mutual. It was not. People always say mutual when the truth has better posture than they do. Evan asked for time. Julian said very little publicly. He did not need to. The people who mattered had been in the room. They had seen Meredith hide her sister. They had seen my parents agree. They had seen the man Meredith wanted to impress choose the kitchen table over the head table. That kind of story travels without needing help. My mother tried to manage the damage. She came to my apartment with muffins from a bakery she never went to, unless she needed forgiveness to smell expensive. I opened the door because part of me still wanted to know what kind of mother would walk in. She looked around my living room like she was searching for evidence that I was lonely enough to apologize first. Then she said, "Your sister is devastated." I said I believe that. She waited. I did not add anything. She said, "You have to understand Meredith was under pressure." I said, "So was Lily." My mother blinked. I said, "Lily was under pressure in her lungs, in her blood, in every tiny part of her body. She still fought. Meredith was under social pressure and decided to erase me." My mother looked down. For once, she had no elegant way around the truth. Then she said the sentence I think she had been avoiding her whole life. "We were wrong. It did not heal everything." Do not let people tell you one sentence fixes years. But it was the first sentence that did not ask me to shrink. My father called that night. He did not talk long. He never did. He said I should have stood up when she said it. I said yes. He said, "I am sorry." I said I heard you. That was all I could give him. Julian called 2 weeks later. His voice sounded different over the phone, less famous, more human. He said he had been working with a children's hospital foundation to expand neonatal transport access in rural counties. He wanted someone on the advisory board who understood the work from inside the ambulance, not from inside a conference room. He asked if I would consider joining. I sat down on my kitchen floor, not because I was weak, because sometimes recognition knocks the strength out of you before it gives it back. He said, I do not want you there as a symbol. I want your judgment. I want your experience. I want the truth from the person who knows what happens when help arrives 10 minutes too late. I said yes. Then I cried after we hung up. Not the quiet hospital crying where you turn away from families so they do not see your face. The ugly kind. The kind that comes from carrying something alone for so long that the first hand reaching for the other side of it feels almost unbearable. The advisory board met once a month. The first time I walked into that room, I almost laughed. Long table, white flowers, name cards. The same kind of setup Meredith had used to make me feel small. Only this time my name was printed in black letters on a folded card in the center of the table. Nora Hale, neonatal transport nurse. Not old family friend, not healthcare, not background, me. When people asked questions, I answered from the road, from the helicopter, from the back of ambulances in winter, from mothers shaking too hard to sign forms, from fathers trying to follow behind us without speeding, from babies who weighed less than some purses in that room. People listened. Policies changed slowly, but they changed. More equipment was funded. More rural transfer agreements were reviewed. Response routes were studied. A training program was built for hospitals that did not have specialists on site. I still worked nights. I still tied bands when there was time. I still wrote tiny words in marker. But now when I held a baby through the dark, I knew I was not just surviving the system. I was helping rebuild part of it. Meredith mailed me a card 3 months after the dinner. No return address, but I knew her handwriting. Inside was a photo from when we were children. I was maybe 9. Meredith was 12. She was standing in the center of the frame holding a trophy from a school play. I was behind her, half-hidden, clapping. On the back, she had written, I did not notice where you were standing until now. That was not enough, but it was honest. I put the photo in a drawer, not on the shelf, not beside Lily's band. Some things are evidence, not memories. Evan eventually ended the engagement for good. Meredith blamed me for a while. Then she blamed Evan. Then she blamed pressure, timing, public embarrassment, anything except the choice that started it. But the truth was simple. She had invited me to dinner on the condition that I stop being her sister. And the man she most wanted to impress had recognized me before she did. That is the kind of humiliation you cannot decorate your way out of. People ask if I felt satisfied. I did not. Satisfaction is too loud a word. What I felt was space. Space where shame used to be. Space where apology used to be expected from me. Space at the center of my own life. I still see Julian sometimes at foundation events. He always asks about Lily before I do, because grandparents are like that. He shows me pictures, Halloween costumes, missing teeth, a school backpack too big for her shoulders. Every time I see her face, I remember that night in the ambulance, the alarms, the rain, the fragile, stubborn rise of her chest, and I remember the restaurant, my sister's perfect flowers, my parents' silence, the back table, Julian crossing the room like truth had legs. Before you go, tell me this. If your family asked you to come but not as yourself, would you walk away before the dinner, or would you sit there and let the truth find you? I used to think being seen meant someone had to choose to look at me. Now I know better. Sometimes being seen means refusing to disappear when they put you in the shadows. Sometimes it means sitting still while the right person walks across the room. And sometimes it means letting the whole table learn that the woman they hid near the kitchen door was the reason someone else's little star got to come home. If you like smart revenge stories where quiet truth hits harder than shouting, subscribe and stay with us, because no one who belongs at the center should spend their life at the back table.